This is a pretty far cry from my usual kind of content, but recently a video made by HandleBarBells caught my attention on YouTube recently, and it basically covers how they think that the Judgment is a far weaker killer than what many people hype them up to be. Now, if you've been following the channel recently, you should know that I am a pretty huge fan of the Judgment, and think they're probably one of the strongest killers Dead by Daylight has ever released. So I was fairly intrigued to see that this video popped up in my timeline, especially since it held a very strong opinion that differed very heavily from my own. Now, I am afraid that this is something that has to be said, but considering how volatile the Dead by Daylight community is, I should go ahead and specify this here. Any harassment sent to HandleBarBells as a result of this video is not condoned or endorsed. This video exists not as a means to harass a creator for holding a different opinion, but instead to engage in nuanced discussion surrounding the viability of the Judgment. With that being said, hello slimes and non-slimes alike, Rosa here, and welcome to the Defense of the Judgement.
I don't want to mince my words on this. The Judgment is a bad killer with a skill ceiling that is comically high. If I had to describe this killer in 6 simple words, it would be easy to dodge, hard to use. The Judgment is a permanent 110 killer that has terrible anti-loop and no mobility, which is funny considering she has 4 legs and wings. Her power is terrible for multiple reasons. Her beam is incredibly easy to dodge, it's incredibly hard to use, with margins of error thinner than paper.
I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that you meant to say that the Judgment's skill floor is comically high instead of the skill ceiling, because I don't understand why the skill ceiling being high is a bad thing. However, on your other points considering the Judgment's divine light, it being easy to dodge is just not true. This is due in part to the Judgment having the ability to choose both the starting point and path that divine light takes, which can make it incredibly difficult for survivors to tell how to dodge it properly. The next point you present is that the divine light is incredibly difficult to use, which, although true, that doesn't mean that the Judgment is a bad killer. In fact, if that was the metric we would go off of, then Nurse is the worst killer in the game, which just isn't true. A difficult ability does not mean that it's a bad ability. Unfortunately, this is an argument that is brought up multiple times throughout the video, and it doesn't change the Judgment's viability in any time it's brought up. Finally, the last point presented in this section is how Divine Light has an incredibly small margin of error, which is weird because you quite literally never elaborate on this point. This is especially weird considering that the Judgment doesn't exactly have a margin of error compared to a killer like the Unknown. Unknown is a killer who has to weaken survivors with their UVX first. However, Weaken can be cleansed incredibly easily by just looking at the Unknown. Oftentimes it only takes missing 1 shot as the Unknown for survivors to cleanse themselves of being weakened, hence the incredibly tight margin of error. The Unknown basically has to maintain a 100% accuracy rate in order to injure survivors consistently. Compared to the Judgment, who instantly deals damage to the survivor if the Divine Light connects, what exactly is this margin of error that the Judgment is plagued by that makes them so unviable? I have no idea, and as I already stated, they quite literally never expanded on this point, so I don't know. Let's just move on, I guess.
And has an incredibly long animation lock that grants survivors free escapes. Oh my god, it's so long for her to recover from the strike. Oh. Dude, it locks you out so long if you miss a beam.
Yeah, no, this is just a completely fair opinion to have. The Judgment has a whole 3-second animation lock after firing Divine Light. This is particularly only there to prevent the Judgment from zoning survivors with Divine Light like Pyramid Head or Huntress with their range abilities. But yeah, no, this definitely is something that could be lowered on the Judgment without breaking the character.
While most of her add-ons and advantages require survivors to become heretics to actually become useful, or to proc at all, the problem with this is if you can't hit any shots, which is very likely you won't be able to, they will never become heretics.
Hey, remember what I said earlier about how they kept repeating this point about how difficult it is to use the Judgment's power? This is what I mean. The strength of the Judgment's add-on should not be dictated by the ease of use of the power. If this was the case, things like Hillbilly's add-ons would be terrible since I can't use Hillbilly's chainsaw correctly. That's just not a fair argument to be made. In fact, it's just not an argument. You're just saying that the Judgment's ability is too difficult, which that's just not how you dictate viability.
The idea of exile is good on paper until you actually see it in use. Survivors can add a whole 5 seconds of endurance, elusive, and haste, which is stronger than current base game mechanics.
I find the wording here extremely strange. You specifically say that it adds 5 seconds of base kit mechanics, which are stronger than the base kit of the current game. What you fail to mention is that the PTB changed the base kit mechanics, making it so that it lasts only 10 seconds instead of 15 as it currently is in live, meaning that you can only get 15 seconds of base kit protection, which is as strong as what it is currently. I feel like this word choice was specifically made to mislead people.
All they have to do is run around the exile map holding M2 while avoiding super easy to dodge beams. Also, it takes literally 2 seconds to save someone from exile, and the status can be camped and exploited by Swifts.
Exile is entirely dependent on the skill of the player in question and whether or not it's easy for them to dodge it or not, but it will generally become easier for survivors to deal with exile as time goes on, so I'll give you that. However, a Swift being able to camp the statue to instantly go for the save on them is something that realistically just will not happen. Not only because if you are close enough to get to one of the statues that the Judgment will activate upon exiling a survivor, likely means that you're close enough for the Judgment to see you. And if that's the case, then the Judgment isn't going to let you get the save, at least not in time or without getting a trade, which generally is just a bad idea. On top of that, that requires the survivors to have an immense knowledge of the position of the statues, and which ones will likely become active the moment the survivor is sent into exile, and having all of these factors play into each other, it's just not likely that's gonna happen. Also, I don't know why you make it a point to how long it takes to save someone from exile, as it's quite literally the same amount of time as it takes to unhook someone.
Also, let's say you're playing a really dominant game and have down and exiled multiple survivors, and it only takes one survivor performing the save for everyone to be released. Does that remind you of anything? And they just get back up. Something from the Black Banquet being made a base game mechanic. I wonder if anyone predicted this. And mark my words, if we killer mains do not send a message that this is not okay and we do not accept it, elements from this event will be added to the normal game, whether it be in the form of perks or added through base kit.
This is the part of the video that has undergone several rewrites, and in fact, it is the part of the video that has made me consider dropping this entirely. This argument hinges on the fact that you did not know about the prototype build of the Judgment. A prototype of the build of the Judgment, mind you, that was showcased only by the most popular content creators in the Dead by Daylight space, such as Oddstarva and Hens. A prototype version of the Judgment where Heresy acted as a third health state, and the Zealous mode quite literally didn't exist. That is the only way this argument makes sense, because if you did know that this existed, then you know that this predated the Black Banquet event by months. At most, you could argue that the Black Banquet and the Exile was developed in conjunction, but that's pushing it considering the buggy state that the Black Banquet came out in. Additionally, there's no mention about how Old Ruin is part of the base kit of the Judgment, and additionally, there's quite literally no mention of the Zealous mode at all. I bring this up because Zealous mode holds a lot of similarities to Plague's Corrupt Purge, and how if you already have Corrupt Purge, it's probably a bad idea to go ahead and gain it again by drinking from another fountain. I mention this because it's basically identical to exiling multiple survivors. You don't want to exile multiple survivors, that way you can maintain your uptime in Zealous mode, as it makes landing your shots far easier and far more consistent. There's no mention of this anywhere in the video, primarily to make Exile look worse than what it actually is.
Oh, and by the way, when you pull your teammate out, they spawn right next to you, so you can insta-heal them because the killer doesn't get a notification of where they are, unlike with unhooks.
This is true. It's very easy for you to reset against the judgment as there's no notification about how they got saved, which is really dumb because they actually mentioned that they would add this from the prototype version of the build to the PTB version, but that just didn't happen for some reason.
Another thing to note is all perks that proc when you hook a survivor, they do not work when you exile someone.
Once again, leaving out crucial information to make exile look worse than what it actually is. This goes both ways. Perks like Decisive Strike and Dead Hard will not activate if a survivor is sent into exile.
Now, these are the statements I'm hearing the most in defense of the judgment, and I just want to address them really quickly.
She's OP because she can sit in the middle of a map and shoot her beam at gens.
I don't agree with this, and the biggest reason is you can literally see and hear her beam coming at you from a mile away. This killer, like all killers, is easily defeated if you just pay attention to your surroundings. I mean, look at this. You can literally see the beam through walls. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that this is a super strong meta strategy, which it isn't. Is this really what we want the killer role to become? Just standing in the middle of a map, throwing out random 50-50s and hoping they hit something? I certainly don't want that. I want both sides of the game to be challenging, fun, and reward intelligent gameplay. And this is not that.
This is actually something I've been saying myself for a while now, so I'm actually glad you pointed this out yourself. On top of that, you actually provided some new arguments that I myself haven't actually said yet, so props to you, I guess.
She has anti-loop, you just have to 360 with the beam.
So the answer to her having 0 anti-loop is to charge the beam, spin around mid-chase, losing all sight of the survivor you're chasing, hope that your timing and aim is completely perfect, and hope even harder that the survivor is both blind and unable to move, then spin back around to see if you won that 50-50. This is so obvious, telegraphed, and unreliable. No one in their right mind can consider this any type of anti-loop. No one's going to be falling for this for any substantial amount of time. Again, pay attention to your surroundings, and this tech is rendered completely useless.
Yeah, it's gonna be bad if you just do it improperly. The 360 relies not by looking away the moment you press the power button, but instead looking away when the power is about 3/4 of the way finished charging. That's the time you want to look away to minimize as little time as the survivor is off your screen as possible. And I know you're doing it incorrectly, as in your showcase, every single time you use the ability, you look away from the survivor before you start charging it up, which isn't how the 360 works. You charge up the beam, look away when it's about to finish charging, and then turn back around. Additionally, you still have plenty of time to wait for the beam to fully charge and readjust your aim when you turn back around to face the survivor. The only time where this is entirely gambling is if a survivor manages to break line of sight against you, at which point, yeah, you're gonna have to predict where the survivor is going. Other killers work exactly like this, mainly Nurse and Vecna, and those killers are still extremely good even though they have to predict where the survivor is going. Additionally, this entire counter-argument hinges on the fact that the 360 is the only form of anti-loop that the Judgment has, even though the Judgment is able to perform a 180 and 90-degree flick to hit survivors.
You just have to practice with her.
As far as practicing with her, I did give her a fair shake. I played about 5 games with her. I waited 20 to 35 minutes in between each game because the killer queues were that crazy. Can I get this 3rd game so I can stop playing this terrible ASIM? I tried, guys, and every single game it just got worse and worse. I have zero desire to learn a killer that has been purposely designed to be as difficult as possible to use, especially in this terrible game state that feels like taking a seat in the ball kicking machine.
It's basically impossible for me to make this counter-argument without sounding like a dick, but I don't think 5 games is enough on the Judgment to properly learn how to use their ability, especially from what I've seen from the B-roll footage. I definitely think that there is more that you could learn on this killer, but if you don't have any desire to do so, then yeah, you're not going to see any improvement. That's just kind of how practice works. I don't say this to be a dick, it's just kind of true. Once again, I completely sympathize with the idea of not wanting to spend the time to learn a killer, especially one that you have no interest in learning the power of. However, as this entire counter-argument basically comes down to personal experience, I don't really think it should count towards a discussion of whether or not the Judgment is a viable killer.
Another thing I keep hearing is, she's
S
S tier in the right hands. This is absolutely untrue cope with flawed logic. This can be said about literally any killer in the game, even Perkless Trapper. It's not the right person playing the killer, it's the right people playing Survivor.
This is, again, one of those things where it comes down to personal experience, and thus I don't think should be included in discussion about a killer's viability. So I don't really have a problem with this rebuttal. So what exactly can be said on the Judgment? Well, in my opinion, the Judgment is still one of the strongest killers in the entire game, possessing a strong anti-loop ability, inbuilt slowdown, and having the ability to circumvent some of the strongest perks survivors can bring. All the while having very few downsides, such as a poor mobility option which is offset by their huge range. They are a killer who is probably going to sit at the highest of A tiers, if not make a contention for being one of the top 3 killers in the entire game. But that's just what I think. What do you all think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if you liked the video, go ahead and like and subscribe for more. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Cheerio.